Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into the moment Donald Trump essentially declared an economic war on the world, a bold move he claimed would kick off a brand new golden age for America.
And it all started with this bombshell statement right from the White House. You see, this wasn't just tweaking a policy here or there. No, this was framed as an economic declaration of independence, a total reset of America's role in the global economy. So here's our game plan for breaking this all down. First, we'll look at the declaration itself. Then, we'll unpack the whole America First logic behind it and get into the nitty-gritty of the tariffs. After that, we'll see the immediate shockwaves it sent through the economy, check out how Mexico played its cards, and finally, we'll ask the big question. Was this the start of a whole new economic era?
So, picture this. From the White House, President Trump announces the biggest import taxes seen in about a century. This was no small adjustment. It was a massive, deliberate pivot away from the way the U.S. had been doing trade for decades.
Okay, so what was at the heart of this plan? Well, it was a massive, universal tariff. Basically a 10% tax slapped on almost everything coming into the country. But, and this is a big but, that was just the floor. The plan was to go even higher on countries that the administration considered the, quote, biggest offenders.
So you have to ask, what's the logic behind a move this huge? The White House gave a pretty simple argument. But, as we're about to see, analysts started digging into the data and found that it was, well, anything but simple.
And right here, you can see the fundamental disagreement. On one side, you have this really straightforward argument. Hey, it's just about fairness, we'll tax them like they tax us. But on the other side, you have experts saying, hold on, the reality of global trade is way more complicated than that simple math suggests.
Right. And this is the key idea analysts brought up. Decontextualized data. You just can't average everything out. It's like comparing apples and oranges. The tax on a motorcycle from India and the tax on a microchip from Taiwan are two totally different things, economically speaking. They have different supply chains, different markets, so lumping them all together to get one number, it can paint a really misleading picture.
All right, let's get down to the specifics. What were the actual taxes being proposed? And as you're about to see, the numbers were pretty staggering. I mean, just look at this chart. It really shows you the sheer scale of what was happening. We are not talking about small adjustments here. A 54% proposed tariff on China, 46% on Vietnam. Even close historic allies like the European Union and Japan were looking at tariffs over 20%. This was a radical shakeup of global trade.
But, and this is an important detail, it didn't apply to everything. Some really critical sectors were specifically left out, at least for the moment. Things like pharmaceuticals, semiconductors, copper, wood, they were all carved out, probably to keep from causing immediate chaos in key American industries.
So, an announcement this disruptive, what was the immediate reaction? Well, we're going to look at Wall Street's response, which was, let's just say, swift. And then we'll hear from everyday Americans who were trying to figure out what this all meant for them.
Well, the market didn't waste any time making its opinion known. S&P 500 trackers, which are a huge benchmark for the U.S. economy, dropped over 2% as investors tried to digest the news. That threat of a real, full-blown trade war, it sent a serious chill through the financial world.
And that chill, that uncertainty, it definitely trickled down to Main Street. This quote here really captures a fear a lot of people had, that no matter what the goal was, the actual result of these tariffs would just be higher prices for regular folks.
But, you know, not everyone saw it as a disaster. There were plenty of people who held a more optimistic view, kind of echoing the administration's own line. The thinking here was, okay, sure, there might be some short-term pain, but it's a necessary step to get better deals in the long run. And then you have this take, just straightforward skepticism. This viewpoint sees a trade war not as some clever negotiation tactic, but as something where everybody loses. The idea is, once countries start putting up these walls, everyone from big corporations down to you and me ends up paying the price. There are no winners.
Okay, so let's zoom in now and look at how one country handled this high-stakes situation. As a direct neighbor and a massive trading partner, Mexico had to tread very carefully, and they decided to lean heavily on the trade agreement they already had with the U.S. and Canada.
This metaphor from an economic analyst, Juan Carlos Moreno Brid, is just perfect. It so powerfully captures the incredibly delicate spot Mexico was in. Their whole strategy wasn't about trying to fight the dragon. It was about trying not to get burned.
So instead of fighting fire with fire and slapping on their own tariffs, Mexico went with what they called a cool head strategy.
The goal wasn't to take on these new tariffs directly. Instead, it was to use their existing trade deal, the TMEC, to try and get a better position compared to everyone else. It was a really pragmatic approach, all about damage control.
All right, so let's pull all the way back. What's the big picture here? Was this just a temporary disruption, some kind of tactic that would eventually fade away? Or were we actually watching a fundamental, long-lasting shift in how the global economy works?
You know, what's really fascinating is that, according to analysts, this wasn't some new idea for Donald Trump. Not at all. His protectionist views have been incredibly consistent for decades. You can find him saying similar things way back in 1987. And the goal he stated, to reindustrialize America and use tariff money to fund the government, that sounds a lot like U.S. economic policy from the 1890s, way before our modern globalized world even existed.
So ultimately, this whole episode forces us to ask a really huge question. For the better part of a century, the global trend has been toward more open markets, fewer barriers. This policy was a direct challenge to all of that. And it leaves you wondering, are we on the edge of a new era, one that's defined not by cooperation, but by fierce competition?